I'm going to go over how to build a strong argument for whatever case you will make about technology in your paper. So to start, I'm going to be arguing a con-technology position that technology makes us less efficient. And here's my claim. Technology platforms make it easier to multitask, which eventually leads us to become less efficient and productive in our work. So once I have my claim, let's say that I found this piece of evidence that I think will be useful to prove my point. So the evidence is high multitaskers were bad at filtering irrelevant information from relevant, something that, one might suppose, a multitasker should be especially good at. High multitaskers also had diminished powers of mental organization and extra difficulty switching between tasks. So once I have my evidence, my next step is analyzing that evidence, and that's where the process of CECA comes in. So CECA is a format that we'll be using for the next 2 years in order to analyze evidence. It begins with context. Context is the background information your reader needs to know or remember in order to understand your evidence. It includes the author's last name and qualifications, the source of the information, so whether you're getting it from a magazine or newspaper or a TED Talk, and it's a short gist of the article. Here's what that looks like in practice. Clifford Nass, a Stanford psychology professor, had test subjects do a series of tasks while not multitasking. Some subjects usually multitasked a lot, others did not. So notice that in my context, I have the author's name, Clifford Nass, the author's qualifications, that he's a Stanford psychology professor, and a little bit about the study he did. My next step is evidence. Evidence is a carefully chosen quotation or fact that supports your thesis. Evidence also includes a quote lead-in or tag. The sentence with the quote in it has to start in your own words. So that can sound like, according to Turkle, or in the words of Carr. Here's what that looks like. So I have my context first. Clifford Nass, a Stanford psychology professor, had test subjects do a series of tasks while not multitasking. Some subjects usually multitasked a lot, others did not. According to Nass, high multitaskers were bad at filtering irrelevant information from relevant, something that, one might suppose, a multitasker should be especially good at. High multitaskers also had diminished powers of mental organization and extra difficulty switching between tasks. So notice I lead into my evidence with according to the author's last name. The next C in CECA is for citation. The citation shows where you got your evidence. This is usually the author's name if it is available. In some cases, the author's name is not available, and in that case, you'll use the title of the article. So for instance, in this Nova article, Is Multitasking Bad for Us?, we have the author's name right underneath the title. That's Brandon Keim. So I would put the author's last name, Keim, in parentheses after my evidence. Here's what that looks like. Notice after my quote, I have Keim in parentheses and then a period afterwards. The last step is analysis, which we've already gone over in class. Remember that analysis is made up of 2 pieces. The first explains why the quote is important, and we call that interpretation. The second explains how the quote supports the argument, and we call that the commentary. So here's a look at my whole CECA so far. Notice that at the beginning I have my claim. My claim was that technology platforms make it easier to multitask, which eventually leads us to become less efficient and productive in our work. I then have my context, my evidence, and my citation. And now I'm moving into my analysis. So my analysis begins with interpretation. This evidence shows that even when they were not actively multitasking, multitaskers had developed mental habits or skills that hurt their learning. They were less organized, more distracted, and worse at figuring out what was important to pay attention to. Notice that my interpretation highlights what is important in the evidence. That's the job of the interpretation. So in my evidence, Nass noted that multitaskers had diminished powers of mental organization. And I explained that in my interpretation, that multitaskers had developed mental habits or skills that hurt their learning. The last step is commentary. My commentary is, therefore, while it might appear that technology makes us more efficient, it actually hurts our brains in ways that ultimately slow us down and make us less effective thinkers. Remember that the role of the commentary is to lead us back to our claim. So in this case, the claim was that technology leads us to become less efficient and productive in our work. And I'm leading to that claim in my commentary by saying that technology hurts our brains in ways that ultimately slow us down and make us less effective thinkers. So here's what the process looks like altogether. In the paper you will be writing, every piece of evidence you use gets a CECA, meaning that each time you introduce a new piece of evidence, you need to analyze it using this format. Your first and second body paragraphs need at least 2 CECAs each, so you will analyze 2 separate pieces of evidence for each of your body paragraphs. At this point, everyone will be in a slightly different place, so you might be ready to begin your CECAs already, or you might still have to gather evidence before you're ready to go.